We're live.
Good afternoon, welcome. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, December 15th. Councilmember Sternad is joining us remotely this evening. First on our agenda is a presentation on the neighborhood transportation service from Kay Fisk. Kay, are you with us?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you. Welcome, Kay.
Well, good to hear your voice, and it's good to be with the group. Rather be in front of you, but this will do. Well, I'm going to start out by saying good evening, Mayor Nick and council members. It's been a rough year for all of us, and nobody even has to go into detail about that. I'm here to talk to you again tonight, like I have in the past, about funding for NTS. And I want to share a few facts with you before we get to the actual ask for the funding. I always like to point out some of the things that we've done, not necessarily that just has to do with just transportation, but just to highlight some of the things that Horizons does for the community. I know you guys have the Encore Cafe for older adults in Marion, and I believe that has had to close down for the during the duration and COVID as well. We have what we call Brownstone, place where we have our older adults come for a nutritious meal. We've had to close that down, of course, too. And this is sad because it's not only a nutritious meal for these individuals, but it's a social event that definitely means a lot to them. There's a lot of other things that we do. I've given you a sheet, I believe that Rachel would have probably provided to you. Some of the other projects that Horizons is involved in. And again, it's just to kind of make you aware that there are a lot of things that are being done in our community to make lives better. I want to make sure that you know that we have more than one source of funding for NTS besides the city of Marion. We get United Way funding, which has decreased over the last few years. And this is because the United Way campaigns have not gotten as much money as they've had in the past. So this, of course, flows down to the partner agencies, and not just the NTS program, but all of the programs that they fund have been decreased quite a bit in the last few years. The Greater Cedar Rapids Foundation has been extremely valuable to us over the year, not only just for NTS transportation, but Duratio and COVID funding too, that we've depended upon them a great deal. Medicaid rides, we do those, of course. We are reimbursed for those, but it's like getting blood out of a turnip, and it's you can get it eventually, but it's not timely, and it's something that we kind of scrap to get it. City of Cedar Rapids and City of Hiawatha are both very generous and support us just as Marion does. So we do enjoy that funding as well. I want to talk a little bit about the COVID response that has to do with NTS, because I, number one, am so proud of being able to talk about this. It was just outstanding what we were able to do as soon as COVID became a reality. You probably know that the city buses, Cedar Rapids Transit, stopped operation for a period of time. And during that time, there was really no other public transportation other than NTS. What we were able to do was provide transportation to the essential care workers. We're talking about the people that worked in the hospitals, people in nursing homes, care centers, uh, any of that kind of person would have been somebody that we would have been taking to work. We did it, did this at no cost. We did get federal funding that helped us pay for that, but it was it was a joy for two different reasons. We were able to not have to ask people for money in a time of necessity like this, but we also were not in a position where we had to handle money or tickets or anything of that nature. We had an additional PPE for our drivers at the time. We built a plexiglass cage around them, and of course they had masks and all of the equipment. It was timely, very time consuming to have to, and still is, to sanitize the buses after each ride with passengers. We clean the whole bus down and sanitize it. When people are seated, they're seated in such a way that they're socially distanced properly. So as a result, we're not as able to take as many passengers as we'd like. This has reduced the amount of rides you're able to give, but it's still important to um, keep our clients safe. We, when the city buses were not running, we ran all day Saturday and Sunday and continue to do so. And we'll probably be doing that for as long as necessary, because we feel it's really important at this time to get people where they're going. So the COVID pandemic was at its peak, and along comes the derecho, and of course that took everybody by complete surprise and totally unprepared for anything of this nature. Um, Again, public transit was a huge issue because so many streets were blocked. Um, we were able to go out with our vans and our smaller cutaway buses and be able to pick people up, deliver people to their homes, and get them back and forth. We dropped a lot of the restrictions on what we took people rides, what the rides were for. Usually it's work and school, but during these times of COVID and the duration, we've been very flexible about being able to take people where they needed to go and with no questions asked. We've continued to provide these rides well in the future. And like I said, this is something I'm really proud to be able to talk about. As always, I continue to look for sponsorships for NTS. There's always a new face out there that we possibly can talk to and get some money from them. And then I still work with the legislature to be able to find any ways that I can to get money in that area as well. I actually sat in on a couple of meetings today. One was at a federal level, one was at a state level. And it was kind of interesting. What did I write down here that I was going to share? 1 out of 16 people needs public transit. I thought that was kind of an amazing figure. I didn't know that. So 1 out of 16 people, that's really quite a few. We have such a wonderful relationship with the FTA in Washington, D.C. I go there once a year with the group from Iowa. And it's really funny because, NTS is not a very big operation, but I've talked about it enough that people actually ask, how is NTS? What are they doing? How many rides did you do this year? And I just love that because it actually, we have a face, in the federal FTA. So that's kind of a big deal. I always had this tagline, transportation should not be a barrier to employment. So I'm going to push that out there again, as I always do. You should have received a list of businesses that We've served in Marion. There are some new ones this year. And I think that'll continue to be that way. I listened to your economic development meeting last week, and Nick talked about the many new opportunities that are coming to Marion. These are the kind of places, some of these areas that he's talking about putting in new businesses. These are exactly the kind of places where we take people to work, because often they're off, kind of off site of the normal routes that the city buses take. And so people without cars can't get to work there. And so it's a great thing to be able to partner with these new opportunities that you're going to see in Marion. So let's get to this nasty old sheet here that talks about money. We got to talk about that. Your rides to Marion last year were just about the same as they were the year before. 4,640 rides that came into Marion, and then people leaving Marion to go work in another area, 3,501. So you have a total of 8,141 rides that we did total last year. And then I wrote down, I think I've done this in the past. I don't think I put the number of passengers down. This is 6,919. That's a number of rides. So you can judge by that many of the same riders ride over and over. And you can see the importance there. These are people that would not be able to get to the job without having NTS for transportation. The breakdown you'll see here for how we've calculated the cost for the rides, the number of rides times the cost per ride, and for any new people on the council, and I think there is one new person, and I can't think of their name. And how we calculate the cost per ride, how much it costs us to provide a ride. You take the total number of rides for the year and divide it by your overhead. Your overhead is your gasoline, your insurance, benefits, all of the things that are considered overhead. So you divide that by the number of rides from the year before, and that's what you come up with is it costs us $23.71. So that comes at a cost of $193,000 and some change there. And then of course we charge $6 per ride. Taking that times the number of rides, we come up with revenue of $48,800, and then deducting that from the total number, the total cost, we have an outstanding balance of $144,177. So that's that portion there in your red letters is what it costs us to make up at the end of the year. And that's why we talk to you in the city of Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha and get some supplementary funding from each of you. So last year, $31,689 was the funding we received from you. A 5% increase would be the $33,273 that we're seeking this year. So I would respectfully ask the council to consider this. And then I'd like to open it up for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Kay. We appreciate the update you give us every year and appreciate the great service that's provided to Marion residents.
Our pleasure.
It's a very needed service. I'll open it up for questions for Kay. Anyone have questions?
Who is the new council member? I believe I have not met. You have
Grant,
one.
Grant, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi Kay, Grant Harper here.
Grant Harper.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
And
meet
and where do you hail from? Are you a businessman or?
No, I'm a retiree.
Oh, okay.
Quite a bit.
Okay.
And my wife and I and my family have been residents of Marion for over 41 years.
I'd say you're well seated then. You're not a drifter. I'm a retiree too, but I didn't retire for very long. I retired from Rockwell Collins after 42 years, and then I got started in nonprofit. So I've been doing that for the last 16. So um, I didn't stay retired very long. So it's very nice to meet you, and I'll be eager to meet you in person when it's possible.
Well, it's nice meeting you virtually as well. And I just echo what the mayor said. It's the work that you do is really important to the community. So thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you, Kay. I'm sure that this funding request will be under consideration as we go through our budgeting, so
All
thank you.
right. Thank you very much for allowing me to be with you tonight.
Take care.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
Mhm.
Next on our agenda, we have a presentation regarding Winter Lights fundraising from the Marion Leadership in Action Group. Oh, I'm sorry, that's for Thursday. And it says move to Thursday on my agenda and I totally missed it, so. Okay, next, we have a Medco year-end update from Nick Blue. Are you with us, Nick?
Yes, I am here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving me just a few minutes. I'm going to make this quick, just because I know you have a lot on your agenda here today. Do I share my slides or there we go. So go ahead and go to next slides. What I wanted to do here as we wrap up the year is just provide you an update with some of the numbers that we're looking at, just relative to kind of the condition of our economy, not just at a local level, but across the state and of course, across Lynn County. I've shared these charts with you before, and these are some numbers that we share out to our board on a monthly basis. But what you're looking at here are just both initial and continuing unemployment claims at the county level. So as you can see, as we started to enter October, we really kind of started to hit what was the bottom as far as new initial unemployment claims. So that's obviously very positive. We have started to creep up a little bit, which I think as you look at seasonality and trends that we typically see, perhaps some construction employees, this is the time of year that some of them begin to hit the unemployment rolls. We see these numbers tick up slightly, typically historically, but you can see we have come a long way since really we peaked in both initial and total unemployed back in April and in May. Next slide. You can see here in this next slide, this is just again where total initial unemployment claims have broken out, going all the way back to the spring. Manufacturing continuing to lead the way, followed by accommodation and food service, followed by unemployed or self-employed and independent contractors. One note that I think is really important is that, while we look at manufacturing leading the way in initial claims, I believe we have been pretty fortunate within our manufacturing base that by and large, our manufacturers have really had a decent year. Obviously navigating very unique challenges, but from a business perspective, we've continued to hear very positive things from our Marion specific manufacturing base. Next slide. These are just the numbers from the state level. So while we looked at the county, here's what the state looks like in both initial and continuing claims. Again, from a trend standpoint, very similar, starting to see a little bit of uptick here as we get into the months of November and December. Next slide. This is the unemployment rate. What you're looking at here is we're stacking not just Marion's unemployment rate, but the county and the state as well. The most recent data we have, of course, now we're getting ready to get November data, but was that at the state level, we've dropped down to 3.6%. At the county, it's 3.9%. And you're probably interested to know, and it's good to know, that if we look at a very micro level in Marion, our unemployment rate is actually better than both those numbers at 3.2%. So that's a very positive number as far as we look at kind of the condition of our of really where unemployment claims are coming from. Next slide. These are, I think, some important charts as we look at the low unemployment rate. Obviously, that's good. These slides maybe tell a little bit of an additional story. You can see that if you rewind all the way back to, let's look at the month of March, right? We're just kind of starting to get into this. If you look at our MSA, our MSA is Lynn, Jones, and Benton counties. We had about 145,700 jobs available. That was total employment, not available, but total employed within our MSA. That number dropped to, you can see it bottomed out very quickly in April. It has rebounded, but even when you look at October, we're still down a little less than 10,000 jobs. So we're starting to see some recovery there, which is positive, but we're still net down jobs fairly significantly from March. The other thing that we've been concerned about, and we're really happy to see the October numbers rebound a little bit, and that's the size of our available labor force. And when we look at labor force, while the top chart is our MSA, the bottom is actually our 7-county region. And this particular, I think looking at it from a county perspective is important because we know that that's really our labor shed. That's where our employers in our area really draw from. It's not just from Marion, but it's from a broader region. So as the pandemic has played out throughout the year, in fact, I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal just earlier this week about the types of people that through this have decided I'm exiting the workforce altogether. There's really been an uptick specifically in baby boomers who have decided to leave the workforce. And whether it's that demographic or anyone else, our labor force shrinking is a huge challenge, right? If you look at this chart in February, it suggested our labor force was about 268,000. In September, that dropped all the way down to 250,000. And then the good thing is in October, it's rebounded back up to 256,000. As our unemployment rate continues to shrink, we are very quickly going to be back in a position of needing people, needing qualified individuals to fill jobs. So the work that we've been doing in whether it's Community Promise or at the regional level and trying to recruit people to our region, that work is very quickly going to be just as important as it was before this pandemic hit. Next slide. This is just a chart to show you, again, updated through November, what new construction starts has looked like through the year. As I shared in our annual lunch that hopefully you all were able to see either live or after the fact, obviously new commercial and industrial starts have been down this year. That's not necessarily a surprise to us. However, going into the new year, we feel very confident that 2021 has a potential to rebound quite significantly. We've talked about how housing has been strong, tracking ahead of last year, and we think that's going to remain ahead of last year as we round out the year. In case you're wondering what that big orange bar is, that's your public library that hit. This is a measurement not of tax base, this is a measurement of new construction. And so the full building permit was actually issued in November, which is that number. Next slide. I would encourage you, I'm not going to this time talk more about our pipeline or things that we're working on. Instead, I would just point you again to our annual meeting, which you can go to medcoiowa.org and click on the icon in the upper right-hand corner of our page to get to our YouTube channel. It's been really great to, I think, fast forward to today, over 100 unique views beyond just the great group that we had participate with us earlier in the week for our annual lunch. Next slide. A few quick updates. You are huge partners with us in getting this program off the ground this year that we're really proud of despite the challenging year that we've had, and that's our Community Build program. If you continue to drive by this property on 8th Avenue, you'll see that the students have essentially gotten all the new windows in. The house is almost totally sided. They've re-shingled the garage. We are going to have to bring in a roofing contractor to re-roof the house. It's just a little too steep for students. But as you know, there's not just roofing contractors sitting around looking to do work. So that's probably something that's going to happen in the spring. Next slide. These are just a couple of pictures that, again, we just want to show you of kids literally doing hands-on work, getting this project done. Next slide. So we're just really pleased as we get through kind of the exterior renovations of this house, really the big wins that have already been accomplished. It's really looking great. I was out there just the other day. We have brought on 2 interns. So a couple of interns from the Linn-Mar Community School District to help kind of tell the stories of what's going on with these kids. And so was out there with one of our interns capturing some video footage and just hearing the really positive comments from these students working on the house. It's really great. They're taking great ownership and just a lot of great outcomes that are unfolding through this. So again, thank you for your participation in this. Next slide. Just finally, I just wanted to share with you, we are in the time right now where we're kind of reflecting on our strategic plan for the year and preparing for the next year. Last month, our board of directors, which also includes City Manager Pluckon and Mayor Abouassali, we did a great job of breaking into some working groups to really kind of chew on the year that we've had and talk about how we can continue to support the great work and pivot together with our community to make sure that the work that we're doing is most effective as it can be. Next slide. So when we entered this year, we kind of asked the question, how will we succeed in this year? These are the 5 bullet points that perhaps you'll recall that we really focused our strategy around in 2020. But as we look to 21, we're making just a few minor adjustments to that. And you can go to the next slide. In particular, we're really excited because we're maintaining this statement of being the best city in Iowa to grow a business. But as you drill into the tactics that will come out of that, we're really pleased to see that there are a couple of very tight alignments with the strategic plan that you have developed and you have adopted as a community. Specifically talking about being the community where a project can get done faster than anywhere else. There's an item in your strategic plan that we are lining up with to work together with your team to really be able to own that as an attribute of our community. And the second thing is working with you to develop a very market-driven and targeted economic development policy. We've got a lot of things that we know we can differentiate in, some assets that we want to leverage specifically. Maybe an example is the fiber program that we developed out in the Marion Enterprise Center. So that's a perfect example and opportunity where we can align our economic development policy. And it's just one way that it's great to see each of our strategic plans aligning as we turn the corner into 2021. You can read the other 4 points there, kind of some specific things as we are a few years into community promise that we're focusing on. That third bullet point, it used to say to recruit business and talent. We feel like the topic of talent is addressed in community promise and some things going on at the regional level. But one of the items of feedback that we really picked up on in our conversation last month as a board was we want to get back to those days where we're celebrating some really big groundbreakings, not just quantity of groundbreakings, but big legacy, big warehouse, LPLAS, things of that nature. And so we're going to really adopt some tactics underneath this area of marketing that we hope will support the realization of some larger scale projects that we know are really important to this community, being so heavily residential as we are. And I'm going to move on, I guess, to the next slide, leave those 2 items for conversation perhaps later in the year. Here's just a few kind of unique things that came out of our session, really focusing on making sure that we're taking care of who we have and leading with optimism that's future focused. If you watched our annual lunch, you heard this phrase, future focused, a lot. I think a lot of the feedback that we got from our business partners throughout the year was the appreciation of how, despite the year we've had, we've really sought to continue to move some big things forward. And so we want to really continue to have that posture as we lead within the community. There's some specific themes around the year that we've had. You can see mental health. How does this whole remote worker thing impact culture and workplace and the future of work? So staying in tune with that and really any other post-COVID challenges. And then just again, remaining this position of listening, not just communicating, but really continuing to listen. And we've probably done more of that in 2020 than ever before, but we want to continue to double down. The staff person that we introduced to you a month or 2 back, Brady Quinn, that's really his job, is to be out taking care of who we have, making sure we're listening and supporting the businesses that we have here. So a little bit of a sneak preview as far as our strategic plan as we round the corner into a new year. And we'll just wrap up saying again, thank you for your continued support and partnerships. Firmly believe that 2021 is going to be a very strong year for our community. And it's just an honor to work alongside you all and the great team that you guys have to continue growing this community. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. It goes without saying, we really appreciate the strong partnership between the city and Metco, and the great collaboration that we have on all projects that go on in our city. And I think we're able to achieve so much more through that collaboration, and really, become noted for that, for the great collaboration between the city and the economic development organizations and the business organizations. So really appreciate your hard work and all your efforts in this past year in helping our businesses through this difficult time, and keeping them advised and updated on information and providing the resources that they need. So thank you so much. We'll take questions for Nick from anyone.
If not, we'll just set the stage for the next couple of items then.
All right. Thank you, Nick. So the next item is the presentation from Rookwood Estates. Is that you, Nick?
Well, I guess I would say, unless there's a staff member that wants to set the stage on this, we've been working with this particular developer on kind of presenting this project to you today about how the city might support some master planning exercises and how it aligns with the city's economic development policy. I didn't know if there was a staff person to really kind of introduce the team from there.
So, Lon, is that you?
I can.
Tom?
I don't know if you can see Tom raising his hand.
I can't.
Oh, I can speak to this. So as the council has seen, we've got a request to annex property into the city, and the areas highlighted in on the illustration here. One of the things that became apparent prior to the annexation is we've got some property in the area owned by the city, the school, and then the part that's owned by the city, there's a piece of it that's been identified to be the location for a water tower. And then, so the water department's involved. And then there's also a portion of it that's identified to be a part of, or to be a park. And so, this property was donated to the city, I believe, from the Dostal family a few years back. And so you can see the layout in the upper corner of it. It kind of fills out that rectangle. If you extend the west line of the hatched area up to Fernald Road, you can see the pieces are highlighted. The developer, Rookwood Estates LLC, Mr. Pelly's on the line here. He's and kind of the representative of that group. They brought forward a couple of development proposals for this property, which has some challenges. As you can kind of see on the illustration, there's a large regional detention basin that's a part of this, would be developed as a part of this long-range plan for the area. There's some commercial property along 151. So you've got a whole host of landowners and land uses involved in a one piece of property. When it was first brought forward, Rookwood Estates Group brought in a proposal to kind of do some land swapping, put the parkland in different areas. It was reviewed internally, and it was kind of kicked back. And then I think a second proposal was actually presented, and there was a lot of comments and concerns related to that as well. So the developer has kind of taken a couple different attempts at creating something here. And, ultimately, I think it came down to I think all parties, city, the school, while I don't think they were necessarily 100% at the table when we were talking before conceptually, the city from the water perspective and the park perspective and just community planning perspective want to see this develop out into something that's beneficial for everybody. And understanding that they gave two pretty good shots at trying to do that. And, you know, they're using their time, money, and effort to get that accomplished. So ultimately what they're suggesting or making a request for is really to use some of the funding that would be available through an urban renewal area to, you know, bring on a consultant that can kind of be the intermediary between the city, the developer, the school, the water board, and bring the issue kind of full circle and develop out a master plan for not only this piece of property, but also kind of expand it a little bit, show how we would see growth and development east and even along 151 a little bit on the south. So that's the request that's come through. That said, and I think it's a valid request, and certainly from a planning perspective, we support the request. I think it's more about the funding source coming out of the urban renewal area. However, I would point out that while this area is positioned to be in an urban renewal area, that area has not been designated yet. And so we're here at the onset of a conversation, you know, just looking to see how this property would proceed through the development review process over the next few months as well, because it's got to be annexed. The district would be created. We would go out, hire a consultant, work with Rookwood and the development partners to come up with a master plan. So there'd be a lot of integral working pieces a part of this, but really that's, I guess, probably in more than a nutshell, a summary of what's being proposed. So I do think it's important to note that this is really in alignment with the city's strategic plan, in that, you know, we talked about these hubs and these sub areas and really trying to be planful as we move into areas that are undeveloped to ensure that we're really kind of capturing what's best for all parties involved. And I think this is a really good opportunity to highlight that piece, and would certainly encourage the council to support this as we move forward. Just understanding that it's probably going to be some time before we work into a full-blown master plan for this area. It's going to be a little bit of time.
Okay. Questions? Yes, go ahead, Grant.
Hey, Tom, Grant here. So what do you see as the very next step or two in this overall process and their timing?
So I really think the next step would be to see us get some direction that, hey, we would support this moving forward. Bring us back the details. We want to, before we go down too far, and I don't want to speak for the development group, but I think that's the real question. They're kind of wanting to know how they would proceed. They got the annexation on the table. And so with the support, we would look towards trying to get somebody on board that would help us with the master planning effort. Did that answer your question? It would be more about getting support to move forward and solicit proposals from a consultant group. We would get a cost estimate and let the council know what exactly we're talking about before we engaged in that. Understanding that we've got an annexation to go through, and then a urban renewal area creation, which I think the council supported creating an urban renewal area in this area in the past. We just haven't moved on it. One of the reasons is we'd rather create it once we have all of the property within our district, so we don't immediately have to amend it. And I can see Lon shaking his head. So we're kind of holding off on that, but so that's kind of would be the next steps.
Yeah, I would add, Tom, that we were holding the urban renewal that comes to fruition. And I think we're looking at it as an opportunity. And this development will align very much with our growth management strategy. So we have a lot of hopes on what goes in this piece. Would be great if the city will participate or facilitate master planning.
Your Honor,
Yes, go ahead, Nick.
this is really the first time that I think we can recall that we've leaned on this section of our economic development policy to bring a request like this forward. If you get specifically into kind of the qualifying types of projects, there's a component in it that allows to utilize city support to help fund these types of activities when we're talking about a ground that can involve some mixed use properties larger than, I believe it's 15 acres. And so it's really designed for specific purposes like this. We just have not had an opportunity to bring a specific request like this forward. And I think, as your staff has alluded to, it's really a great alignment of hoping to accommodate the objectives of not just one developer, but multiple folks, and also several community interests, as you're talking about here as well. I would say, Tom, you did a great job presenting this project. Mr. Pelly is on the line as well. I think prepared to make some remarks, and I don't know if Chad, you had anything to add to the dialogue. We don't want to just overlook you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. No, you guys, Your Honor, counsel, everyone, for us, Tom did a great job. I think the thing to point out is we spun our wheels on this. We really want to do something to unsterilize the look of the carved out portions that were dedicated to the city in the various uses, park, water tower. We do have a 600-acre plus watershed here, which is in itself, in my opinion, as a civil engineer, an asset. We can do some regional detention. We're certainly open to that and would love the idea to make something that's more of an amenity and a resource for the community as well. And I just think that with it's 150 acres, counting the 120 that we will close on Friday, and the schools and those other various components, we're talking 150 acres controlled right now, plus an additional, I think there's 160 to the east that could be included in that plan. And I think that's an opportunity for all of us. As you all are well aware, we're interested in working with the city. We want to bring a development that's not only going to be lucrative to the city and to us, but we also want to do something that's unique. And I think, as Tom mentioned, it sounded almost like a divorce, having mediation, but I think that's the best descriptive. You've got somebody who's got everybody's interest in mind, not just on behalf of the developer. And I think we will find that we will come up with something unique together. And as you guys know, we're eager and ready to go. We're closing on this ground Friday, which is unheard of that we prematurely close, but we're that confident in this property. We're vested next door with our Rookwood development that's going better than we could have expected. If you haven't taken a look out there, things are starting to come together. And we're excited about the opportunity to once again partner with the city. And we appreciate Nick and Tom and staff's willingness to work with us and push this forward. Like I said, we failed. I'm going to own that. We just couldn't get something that we were excited about, and we threw the hands up, and these folks have really stepped up, and we appreciate the opportunity. So if there's certainly any questions, I'm here to answer them. Otherwise, we do thank you for your continued support and look forward to working on this.
Hey, any questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Steve Jensen here. My comment to this on a high level is I think it does align with a lot of the discussion, some of the discussion we had at our strategic planning meeting as far as having advanced planning, and with the opportunity to do advanced planning on such a large section of land that will be on the east edge of the city, where we got city land, we got school land. There's going to be a lot of uses for that over 100 acres of land. So from that standpoint, I like the idea of the city being involved and participating in some of the funding, not all of it, but certainly some of the funding for a study and bringing in a consultant so that everybody understands where this is going. I kind of liken it to the Indian Creek neighborhood by Indian Creek that was planned on the northeast corner along 35th Avenue. And so if we can come up with a representation similar to that, so everybody knows where this is going and how it's going to be laid out in the future in a macro standpoint, I like that idea.
Any other questions or comments? I see it as an opportunity also. I think it's when such a large area is going to be developed, it is in the city's interest to make sure that that we're part of the process and that what happens there adds value to the community. That's always something that's important. I think that, you know, we grow in a way that makes sense and that adds value. I like what you said, Chad. You know, I say that all the time to developers. We want developers to make money, of course, but we also want them to have the community in mind and to build things that add value for the community and that we can all things that we can all be proud of. And I think the city having an opportunity to be involved in the master planning of an area like this, I think is a positive. Other comments or questions? Okay, anything else to add, Tom? Or is that? Okay. We'll move on to page 2, which is a presentation from Green Park Apartment Living. I will have the Mayor Pro Tem handle the discussion on this.
Okay. Tom, are you doing that presentation?
I guess I wasn't planning on this one.
Can you tell us who is? Who's out there to give us a presentation on the Green
Were
Park?
you gonna?
Yeah, I actually think Mr. Pelly is going to speak on behalf of this group as well. I think, as you know, the Green Park Apartment Projects is one that you've been familiar with, as some of the zoning things have been working and perhaps reworking its way through the system a little bit. But we've been looking at this project together with the economic development team for the past several weeks. And I think just to set the stage, I believe Mr. Pelly is going to speak on behalf of the project and just some of the unique components that they're seeking to navigate with this project. Chad, you still there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, council. Again, you know, we were just speaking on this, I think, at the last council meeting. This development has some unique challenges to it. As we discussed at those meetings, there's a pretty substantial price tag associated with the ground and then a cleanup opportunity on the existing building. There has been a Grayfield Brownfield Award, although it won't cover the cost of cleanup. It just is a project that in itself is expensive. What we want to do is provide a high quality project that all the amenities, the quality of construction, the green practices with our construction and some of those other bells and whistles, if you will. And quite frankly, the economics on every one of these projects that we've built in the community and other communities just have a gap in what our local economy can sustain and be competitive with the rental rates. And so with that, we have a gap, a substantial gap. And I'm not sure, Nick and Tom, if you guys have shared those financials, but what we're looking for is an abatement request essentially on this property to assist us with making this project financially feasible in a nutshell. And I'm just going to leave it at that. If there's any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Chad, to answer your question, yes, we have received that information.
So if you have a chance, you can take a look at it. It's again, you know, we don't have the architectural plans completed yet and out for final bid, but as you can see, the price tag on the project's roughly $25 million with the rent project.
Well, it looks like perhaps we lost
Gap. Even with the abatement, we still got a little homework to do. We'll work through some of those, refining the construction costs as we get into the season, and hope that some of the market rights itself, if you will. We've seen a 40 to 50% increase in material costs over the last year. and we're expecting those to come back in line somewhat. Again, the price of the dirt from the YMCA is on there, and that's $1.1 million, which for a residential project, we like to be a lot less than that. We like to be around $2 a square foot for the usable dirt that we're developing. This is obviously more of along the lines of what you'd see for a commercial and office. There's just some challenges with it. And I think if you look at that spreadsheet, you'll see that there's some gaps there, all of which I think, again, working together, partnering with the city, we can bring a project that's of high quality that you'd expect from us to the table that we all can be proud of. The market studies and our gut check tell us that there's plenty of capacity in the rental world. And as I said at the council, I believe this project with its walkability and close proximity to resources is set up for success in that sense. So with that, if there's any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions about this presentation? All right, thank you, Chad.
Your Honor.
We'll move the meeting back to the mayor.
Okay. Next is the consent agenda. Any questions or comments on items A1 through 3? If not, we'll go on to A4. Is that Seth?
Yes, Council. We have as part of the MOU for with the YMCA, we are in charge of putting together an advisory committee of 7 individuals. The Y is responsible for putting together, coming up with 3 individuals. The City Council is responsible for another 3, and then there's a joint individual that is made up. That is appointed by the Parks Director and the CEO of the YMCA. So in front of you, we do have some recommendations from the Park Board to be able to have to select 3 members from City Council, and that would be a City Council representation or representative. That would be something to discuss here at the meeting today, a Park Board representative, which is Brian Fiskus. And then we had selected a Wendy Neal as a community member with her activeness into the community, and it's come to our attention that she does not reside in Marion. And so that would be a discussion to be able to remove her from consideration during this time, and we can provide another recommendation for a resident at Thursday's meeting or at the next council meeting.
Okay. I will just start by saying any council member who would be interested in being considered for the council representative seat, please let me know as soon as you can. And you could also talk to Seth about what the obligation requires and what it entails. Any questions or discussion? So on Thursday, we will definitely be voting on Brian Fiskus. Is that right, Seth?
That is correct. And if we have any city council member that is interested, or we can definitely include them on there, but we'll definitely have the Brian Fiskus on there for Thursday.
Okay. Okay. Any questions or thoughts on that? All right, moving on. A5 through D1 are not marked for discussion. Any of those items that you would like to discuss in particular? If not, we'll move on to D2. That's the memorandum of agreement with Monarch Research Project. Is that you again, Seth?
That is me again. So as part of this has been a project that we've been doing for multiple years now as part of the 1,000-acre pollinator initiative. This is in partnership with local area Cedar Rapids Parks and Recreation and Lynn County Conservation, and also with the Monarch Research. We are looking at for 2021 and planting 21 acres, and this would be located into the development park where public service is building the industrial park there for 2021. Obviously, once we'll be working with public service on when we can actually implement these plantings, but the seed will be purchased for 2021 in the spring, and we'll hold on to the seed when we are ready to plant. But this is kind of our cornerstone for this project, capping off 1,000 acres for the community. And so we wanted to end our 1,000 acres with kind of a cornerstone project, marking that industrial park as that cornerstone area. So we'll continue to look at pollinator acreage as part of this. But I did want to touch base and say that we are reaching 1,000 acres after this 2021 year.
Where does that put us in our commitment? Didn't we have like a commitment of 238 acres or something like that? How does that fulfill our entire commitment to the 1,000 acres?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. As you know, as part of our mission is to continue to conserve and promote conservation in our community. You know, we'll continue to take a look and implement where we can do pollinators. But yeah, this as far as our commitment, this will fulfill that.
Okay, so what's the memorandum of agreement then?
So the MOU is with Monarch Research. So we do get all the seed is donated to the city, about $17,000 worth of seed to be able to implement the pollinator prairie onto city property. And so the agreement is really just the donation of the seed and the intentions of planting it and maintaining it as such.
Okay. Everyone clear with that? Any questions? Okay, no questions. Thank you very much, Seth.
Yeah, thank you.
And moving on under the consent agenda still, page 4, there are no items marked through F3 on page 5. Any of those items in particular that need to be discussed? Okay, then we'll move on to F4, back to Green Park Apartment Living. We'll turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, so we're talking about a resolution to set a public hearing for the Green Park Apartment Living proposal. Is that you, Tom?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Well, I hate to be here to ask the council to set this hearing again. This would be a redo, if you please, from the public hearing that was conducted at the last meeting. Upon further review and analysis of the staff application and such, it was determined, and we did go back and ask the submitting firm to reconfirm what we had suspected, but the legal description submitted for the rezoning request was not inclusive of the entire property. And so, of course, we have some pretty stringent legal requirements as it relates to rezoning property. And one is that the official public hearing notice has to be conducted and include the legal description for the property proposed to be rezoned. So we unfortunately have to repost and redo the public hearing related to the property or related to the rezoning for the YMCA site and the Green Park Living Apartments. So you'll notice that later on in the agenda, there's a resolution to rescind adoption of a couple items that were on the last agenda. This doesn't happen very often. As a matter of fact, the group that we were working with, they feel horrible in that it was submitted in that manner. Honestly, we try to do it internally, check as well, and we missed it just as well as the submittal. So, I don't really have anything to say more than that, except that we're in the situation that regardless of who or why, we have to redo it. So this is a resolution setting a hearing for January 7th related to the amendment, the future land use map amendment and rezoning and preliminary site development plan for the property at 3100 10th Avenue, so the YMCA site. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. This doesn't happen very often, but through the years, it's happened on occasion.
Tom, so the only item that's really changed from the original public hearing we had just relates to the legal description, not anything else related?
Yeah, everything else is the same. There's been no, there's been no change to any of the plans or anything. We figured this out as we were kind of putting the file back together and understanding, next steps. So yeah, everything's the same.
Is there a reason we're talking about rescinding the areas or the aspects we have to rescind? And this resolution, is there a reason these are not together in the agenda?
Well, I mean, from the perspective of just that we normally put the resolution setting the hearing on consent. So yeah, it's.
Gotcha. Oh, this is in the consent. All right.
Yep. Just that we don't usually talk about it in the regular agenda on Thursday. So we just set it up this way.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions?
Honestly, we could probably move the rescinding resolution back to the consent for Thursday, unless there's some specific questions. I don't see why we couldn't do that.
Doing that, they kind of go together.
They do.
All right, let's go ahead and do that, Tom.
Okay.
And,
thank you.
sense.
Apologize for that, but
It'll make sense.
we'll get through it.
Okay. Move the meeting back to the mayor.
Okay, F5 and F6 are not marked. Anyone would like to discuss those? Okay, on page 6, item F1 is not marked. F2, who's presenting that?
Sorry, that would be me. I guess this is just to receive and file the request that we did the presentation on. So if there's I have no further comment on that. So unless there's specific questions that we didn't cover in the presentation, it's just merely to receive and file.
Okay. On to the regular agenda, A2 is marked.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. That's the motion to receive and file the application for Green Park Living that you also heard the presentation on earlier. This is related to A3, that the next step for the request for assistance would be the motion to direct staff to develop an MOU with the company, and then that MOU would come back to the City Council for approval.
So that's A3.
Yep.
Any questions on that? Okay, on to page 7, B1 through B3 are not marked. Any particular questions on those items? Okay, B4. We have Ryan Miller with us.
Yes, Your Honor and Counsel. Item number 4, that's a proposed resolution to extend the original contract with SDR by 45 days. The expiration on the original contract was November 15th. We're recommending extending that 45 days. That's going to allow them to process what remaining debris we think they have through right-of-way collections. And that carries over to item number 5. Essentially, we're going to go out and rebid the right-of-way collection contract. That's going to correspond with the waterway debris collection contract. And so essentially how we're viewing this is that we were in exigent circumstances or emergency circumstances. And so 90 days after the period of the storm, that was November 15th. That's why we put that deadline. Gave them a 45-day extension to process everything, make sure they got all the right-of-way debris processed. Here on going forward to correspond with the waterway project, we're going to relet that portion of the project, and that's just the processing and then the haul out of the debris. And so staff is recommending moving forward with both of those.
Okay. Questions for Ryan on that one? All right. Then does that take care of B5 too, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So on to B6.
I want to hand it over to him on that one.
Oh, this is.
Yeah.
Okay. I will turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem on this one.
Yes,
Okay, go
sir. The proposed resolutions with between the City of Marion and Thompson Consulting Services. This is a scoping agreement. We did have a session with the council to discuss this. We are going to go ahead and approve what we feel is a fair agreement for Thompson to consider. And then hopefully they will accept that and we'll move forward.
Okay, I think we've had discussion on this before. Any questions by the city council? All right. And that is it. So thank you, Ryan.
Okay, under public safety, item C1. The new fire station, is the chief with us?
Yes, Your Honor.
Hi.
Hi. We need to go ahead with the purchasing of furniture for the new station. We're trying to time it so that the furniture will arrive at the time that the station is hopefully going to be finished. I will be giving an update on the station on Thursday. I was going to do it with this, but I think I'm going to give you, the council, a separate update on Thursday. But for this, we just need the approval. It is within budget. Right now, it's looking as if the furniture would be here the end of March, and we are looking at April for the construction of the station to be complete.
Okay, questions for the chief? All right, thank you, chief.
Thank you.
On page 8, item D1 is not marked. Anyone have questions on D1? Otherwise, we'll move on to engineering. This is a continuation of the public hearing.
Yes, Your Honor. So we'll have the public hearing on Thursday. There is one additional public hearing that's further down, and then we will be able to close the public hearing. I believe Bush is going to give a quick presentation on the different bids that came in for the project. And you can see there's several items awarding contracts.
So will we close the public hearing on Thursday, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Questions? Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, hey, Mike, is this going to be is this 100% bid out now as we approve and talk about all of these? Does this complete the entire bidding out for the library?
From what I understand, yes. I don't know if Kelly's on to confirm that or not.
Yes, Mike, I am on. The only things we have left would be things like furniture, interior.
Okay, would it be appropriate then maybe on Thursday to have an update as to where the bid cost are compared to the original estimated cost?
Yes, and actually Ryan Dean from Bush Construction is on tonight, and I think is ready to provide that tonight.
We can do that. Was
Right.
that not on, is that not, is that
Hello,
appropriate?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the city attorney if that's appropriate. Is that
I mean, with
within the
work
agenda?
sessions, first of all, my mic up. Can you hear me through the speaker? Can you hear me? Okay. When it comes to work sessions, my opinion is, and I think Kara's would be, that it's discretionary with the council. Is this better? Okay. That it's discretionary with council whom they want to hear from on these. So if he
Okay.
wants to speak on it tonight, I think that would be appropriate. Just as long as the council doesn't
Okay.
obviously take action.
I saw you look up at me, so I thought maybe we weren't supposed to.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was just guessing. Okay. All right.
Well, there may be something that comes up during this that legal. does
Okay,
have
so
an
just
opinion on. That's why.
let us know. Okay, thank you. It's always good to check. We don't want to do anything inappropriate. Okay, please proceed, sir.
Yeah, this is Ryan Dean with Butch Construction. Thank you for your time, everybody. We did receive the second and final bid packages with the Marion Public Library. We have those bid packages listed here. There were 14 different bid packages. Overall, as you guys know, we have the bid release 1 work going on currently. So we received bid release 1, now we're on to bid release 2. Overall numbers came in under our $18 million mark. We're about $500,000 under our budget. There are a couple contractors that we have some communication with tomorrow that would solidify everything, but overall pleased with everything and how things came through. If we want to look into each particular bid package that came out with bid release 2, we saw our bid package 4 unit masonry had three contractors listed there. I am showing the percentage of DD estimate. So we did do a what we call a design development estimate at 50% drawing. So comparing the numbers that we received, which is the base bid price, to our original DD documents, I've listed those there. If we're just looking at the masonry contract, or the unit masonry, 86% under our DD for estimate there. Miscellaneous steel down at the bottom of the screen, we only had 1 bidder received with that, but we did come within our budget. Go to the next page. We had general trades bid package, saw looks like six bidders there. Confirm here. Yep, 6 bidders there. We did have a few different alternates within the bid packages. Within this bid package, we had alternate 1, 2, and a unit price there. Alternate 1 was for additional access control. Alternate 2 was a part of a snow melt system, and the unit price costs there were part of a signage allowance. If you factor those base bid plus the alternates at this time, since we are quite under our estimated cost of 18 million, we are accepting, or the library has advised us to accept the alternates. We were a little bit over what we had budgeted there. Just let me back up. So if you look at the overall picture, as I mentioned, we're under our mark there. So there are some fluctuations within each bid package. I would say the majority of them are under what we had estimated for. In this particular case, that we were a little bit over. Moving down to bid package 07A, roof sheet metal there. We had 4 different bidders. Blackhawk Roof Company came in low bidder there. Go to the next page, please. Bid package 08, glass and glazing, had 3 different bidders there. 578, 982 was our low bidder. And if you include the alternate within that, 580, 574, which was quite under what we had budgeted for our DD percent, our DD drawings. Bid package 09A, gypsum board. We had 6 different bidders there. right on our mark there. We had alternate number 4, which was so youth department ceiling clouds. Moving on to the next page, please. We had one bidder for flooring, although we did receive a couple email bids, which didn't comply with what we had sent out. We did have one number there, which was under our estimated amount. Bid package 09C painting, 92,000 was our base bid price, base bid plus alternate, 94,191, 74% of our DD estimate. Next page, please. Food service equipment. We had 2 bidders there, right on top of each other, well within our DD estimate. We had one bidder for our bid package 14A conveying system or elevators, a little bit over our allotted budget. But if you look at the big picture, we're still well within our $18 million mark. Next page, please. Fire suppression, we had 5 different bidders under our fire suppression base bid plus the alternate 101,330, which was well within our DD estimate of 50% of what we had estimated for. Bid package 22A and 23A, which was the plumbing and HVAC combined. Large portion of the project had multiple different bidders under this bid package, which was good to see. Base bid plus all 2,332,875, which was well within our DD estimate. And then I think finally we have electrical on the next page. And 4 bidders there that had multiple different alternates associated with it. Alternate number 1 was some additional light fixture, alternate number 1 was the additional access control. Alternate number 2 was the snow melt. Alternate number 3 were additional light fixtures. And then if you add those base bids, the apparent low $1.6 million, which was within our DD estimate. So that kind of wraps up our presentation and yeah, so I guess this wasn't included earlier. We have the metal wall panels, which we, like I mentioned earlier, we have to follow up with our apparent low East Moline sheet metal contractor. They were right on top of our DD estimate there.
Okay, that takes us through E24. Do we have comments or questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Ryan, I guess I'm glad to hear that all of these estimates or all these bids are coming in about $500,000 under the estimated cost. That, it seems, combined with 2 other buckets that you have with the winter conditions and the contingency amount that's typically in any contract. If I look at those combined, it seems that this project could end up coming in at a good amount under budget, which will put a lot less stress on the remaining fundraising. So
Absolutely.
I think from that standpoint, as soon as we start understanding what those final amounts are, I think that's good to communicate to everybody. So everything's looking very good. Congratulations.
Thank you. We're very pleased to see how it came out.
Yes, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, Ryan, this is Grant Harper. Just a general question, and maybe for a future presentation, if you could at some point, maybe after the first of the year, give us a high-level depiction of how our overall schedule looks, and also what you're now estimating for different phases starting up and then ultimately closing. I think it'd just be useful to see the progression of the overall project against the primary timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do that. It's more of a project manager related task. I'm the pre-construction manager, but I'll absolutely forward that on to our project manager on site to give you periodic updates as to the schedule, like you mentioned, and each phase as we move forward.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you for all your hard work on this project. Kelly,
you.
did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, or I guess Mike, sorry. Mike, anything else to add?
No, I guess I would just say that some of them you're going to approve the bids and award the contract, and some of them you will also be approving the contract. Basically, there's some that are more accelerated and more urgent need versus some of the others, like painting. There's going to be some time and where you need those painters to get in there, and so those contracts will be on the following council meeting.
Okay. Anyone else have any further questions before we move on? All right, item E25 is not marked. Any questions on that item? Okay, E26.
Yes, so this is regarding the rehab of the bridge of Seymour over the Indian Creek. When we were doing this, if we can go to the next slide, Terrell. So this is what we're talking about, is that center pier. Our intention was to reuse this existing pier. When we got the substructure exposed, or the foundation, we found that it was spalling. And then when they actually drilled into it to add the rebar, it was flaking and coming apart pretty well. We did some exploratory drilling and found that the concrete was not solid anymore. So I don't know if that has to do with the freeze thaw cycle of being in the creek. But unfortunately, because of the situation, it was not something that we could just go as planned. So we actually came up with 3 alternatives. If you can go to the next slide. One more. So the 3 options that we looked at was basically, number 1 is remove about 15 inches from the entire exterior of that foundation in segments, and then putting new concrete back in. That was going to, based on the engineering cost estimate, it was about $120,000. The other was actually to add a new cap structure, basically building an exterior one around the existing one. The closest they could get was within 1.5 feet to drive new piles. That was going to be about 183,000. And then the third option was basically remove the entire structure and build a new one. And that estimate was 132,000. You can go to the next slide. With those options, then obviously option 1 was the less expensive, but unfortunately it had the shortest life. So just because we replaced that 15 inches on the outside of it, we don't know if that inside is actually solid concrete or if it's going to continue to fail on us. So it was more of a Band-Aid, and we really don't want that structure to fail. Option 2 was the most expensive. And again, it's not technically fixing the issue because we're just putting basically a shell on the outside of that, and the inside could still fail. And then by making that structure larger, it sits in the creek, we create hydraulic issues. And technically by new standards, you have to have a 0 rise. So we would have to figure out how we rechannel the creek to make it wider in that situation. So it would be more than just the bridge cost, but also widening the creek towards the water department, or again to the west. And then option 3, because it was pretty similar to option 1, it actually had the longest life. And even with option 1, there's a chance that we'd have to demolish the entire thing anyways. So if we can go to the next slide. So the left picture is what's out there today that we were trying to salvage. There was still going to be some rebar that was going to be fixed. You can tell that there's some areas where the rebar has popped on the vertical structures, and that was going to be repaired as part of the project. So obviously that wouldn't have to be done. The picture on the right is basically what we're proposing then to do. It's a slightly different structure. It's brand new, but this way we know it's going to be sturdy and hold the bridge up, not only so that the bridge does not collapse when a trail user or the parks department is up on top of the bridge, but for the users that are going to walk under the bridge, so that the bridge does not fall down on top of them. So it's unfortunate when you try and reuse a structure and there's unknowns. Obviously, we weren't planning on spending this extra $126,000, but it's something that when the contractor came aware of it, got us out there with our structural engineer, and this was the best option that we saw in it. Not showing the contractor what our engineer's estimate was, he actually came in underneath the engineer's estimate for their proposal. So if you remember, it was about 132, and they're willing to do it for 126 and change. This will have to go through the DOT for review as well, and it is more of a rush just because the steel and trying to get that stuff ordered. If you look at the documents that are included in your council packet, there are some items that will be wasted, such as the rebar that was going to be drilled into this structure that you can't just take back now that they've all been cut to the proper sizes. So it obviously will save on the labor of not having to install them and do that work, but some things are already purchased and so they're a sunk cost. So I will open up if you have any questions regarding this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, could you go back to the cost summary for each of the options? Okay. So nominally $12,000 difference between 1 and 3, and 3 is a complete new build and with new footings, correct?
Correct. And then the number that we actually got was 126, so it actually would be between those two.
Okay. Well, I just, my thinking goes to having favoritism for option 3.
Yeah, and as an engineer, you know, we have to put the life and safety of people foremost, even if it was the most expensive option. We just have to look at the different lifespans and our comfort level as far as how long we think it's going to last when we build things.
Just to follow up, what for option 3, what do you feel the lifespan of that structure will be?
It'll be just like our typical bridges, 50 to 100 years. They are going to put some riprap around it to help with the scour around it. But it's a full steel pile that gets driven down. The old bridge that was there actually had wood piles. A lot of it has rotted, and we found that when we removed some of the existing structure out there.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, F1, I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, this is regarding a public hearing on an amendment to the future land use plan related to the Midwest Development Company project off of Albernet Road. This is Tom.
That's me.
All right.
So this project is probably familiar to the city council. We reviewed this at a previous meeting in discussions. At that time, we did the same public hearing. So we covered the future land use map, and then we showed the comprehensive plan, and then also we walked through the development proposal at the time. When we did that, there were some concerns at the Planning Commission, and then there were a great deal of citizen concerns as well. And the council at the time did deny the proposal and did not go forward and approve the land use plan amendment. So at that time, we had went through the review and the presentation on all concepts and development proposals associated with this project, but the end result was the future land use map was not approved, and therefore all other items as well would not have been considered. So Skogman Development or Midwest Development went back and took a look at what was being proposed. They did make some adjustments. They removed one building, which was 10 units, reduced the density of the development from about 12 units per acre down to about 10 units per acre. They took the development that was, they did show some of the area was in the floodplain. They reduced that significantly. And so they really did make some adjustments. And I think the bigger thing that they did, and the one that I think the council really wanted to see, was they went back to the neighborhood and had some meetings, kind of fleshed out what the project actually was, because I think there was some confusion in that. We did also go back to the Planning Commission with this because of the change in the preliminary site development plan. And so we expanded our notification procedure. And I think the community input and the neighborhood impact input really helped kind of address a lot of the issues that were being had. Rachel, I don't know if you can go to the next slide, or I'm sorry, Terrell, if you can go to the next slide. I think we did add some pictures. So one of the items, and I think the council is pretty familiar with the project. I wasn't going to walk through the site plan and everything specifically, only because we did it previously. One of the big concerns, I think, was the relationship of the development to the multifamily being proposed. As you can see in this illustration, the arrows indicate where there's existing homes. Bowstring Drive, as illustrated, in the homes that are adjacent to that drive. Those are, I haven't driven down the road recently, but it's final platted, so there's probably some homes going in there now and maybe up. But clearly from Flight Drive, there are homes. So there's still another road that's going to be built between the existing homes and the multifamily homes being proposed. And you can kind of see how the view shed would be. I believe if you go to the next slide, maybe. It kind of illustrates it a little further. So there have been a number of changes. Oh, and then there was some architectural elements added to the buildings. There was a wrapping of the base before the side facing the street, which would be on the left-hand side, was kind of a blank wall. They've changed the material colors and type and added windows into the building. So it really makes it more visually appealing from the exterior, especially as you're driving down Albernet Road. And so there's been a number of modifications, and I think those really spoke to the developer responding to the neighborhood concerns and issues as they went back, and then also from the council. Give me 1 second here. As I had indicated, they've made some adjustments. The Planning Commission did review the items being proposed at their November meeting, and then they did bring. And then one other thing that I would point out is that the recommendation at the commission meeting was a unanimous support for. I think if you'll recall, there was one vote in opposition of the proposal. And I believe that one was primarily based on the floodplain considerations. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I recall. So with that, staff is recommending to move forward with approval of this, and obviously, Planning Commission's recommendation is following through in that suit as well. My apologies for not getting the elevations. I know in the packet there'll be some more graphics. They may actually be in iCompass now if you look at them. We got some visuals that we did show the Planning Commission between when the staff reports went out and the meeting. So we did not, they weren't included in the Planning Commission staff report, but we did show them at the meeting. So we'll be sure to get that in the packet for Thursday. And then I will use the graphics that you just seen for Thursday's meeting as well. And hopefully that will kind of help folks understand the changes and such. So with that, if there's any questions on those, obviously this covers a number of the agenda items, agenda F1 through F4.
Yeah, I'd make a comment to the rest of the city council. I sat in during that P&Z meeting, and it was fairly lengthy when they discussed this project. Again, they did go through a lot of other slides that were not part of our original information that we received on Friday. So if you look at the totality of what they presented, I think they kind of went down the checklist of what we did not like, what our concerns were back in June. In fact, I was one of the individuals that voted no. I had my notes out. I looked at what the concerns were. I think there were only a couple of calls that came in from the neighborhood during that P&Z meeting, and there were really nothing or against the project. They were just basically getting some items clarified. So I think if you look at those additional pictures and items that were part of that P&Z meeting, I think it maybe takes care of a lot of the issues that I had back in June. So I think they've done a good job of kind of maybe redesigning this, adding some more landscaping, buffering it from the rest of the neighborhood, showing what the views would be like from people who are living up above in the existing houses, and still a lot of houses yet to be built between that neighborhood and this proposed project. So take a look at the rest of that information. I think it adds more, certainly a lot more compared to what we had on Friday. I think it's important to understand the entire project. Renee.
Yeah, just a question, a clarification. What will go in first, Tom? The single family, that new street that you pointed out, or this multifamily in terms of the timeline of that build out?
So that next row of how the street is in out there. So if you drove out there now, you'd drive down a street with maybe some foundations and maybe a couple homes in the area. I did not drive the street. I haven't driven it recently. I'm sure the Midwest group can answer that, but so that Bowstring Drive is what I'm speaking to. So those homes are under construction, or I think a lot of the lots are actually empty at this point. It's my understanding that they weren't going to move directly into development of the multifamily, but would be doing that, in the near future, but wanted to kind of get everything kind of lined up so people knew what they were moving towards, so they didn't have any further concerns as they've had thus far. I would point out that so the multifamily in the distance there is east of Albernet Road. West of Albernet Road is proposed to be a duplex development. So Bowstring is single family, and then there will be duplex development extending south of there towards Albernet Road. So you're really kind of seeing that single family, duplex, multifamily, kind of the staggering of the density as it moves south and towards the east.
Will they be providing kind of like when people are building out a larger development like this, sometimes there's a legend at the beginning of the opportunities of what you can buy, and it kind of shows your different options. Because we've changed this recently, do you know if they have plans to put any kind of graphic like this for prospective buyers?
I don't know that. I mean, that would be a really good question, I think, for the development group. But I think the original conversation when this all came through was the desire to change it before they had direct development directly adjacent to the project. And I know it still spurred quite a bit of concern, obviously, as we sit here tonight. We've seen the history, but I think that was one of their impetuses for moving it forward. But I think that's a very good question for them as during the public hearing. They'll probably be much better off to answer that than I.
Okay.
Obviously, we hope they do that, because that helps. There's no call worse than that call that someone makes and says, well, I was told it was going to be X when I bought. Because that's just a tough situation to be in.
For clarity and transparency purposes, I'll definitely ask on Thursday. And then I would agree with what Steve said in terms of it does seem like they really kind of went down and addressed a lot of the concerns that we had. I was also a no vote at that time, and this feels much better than it did then. Thanks.
Yeah. The community meetings help tremendously when they're done by the development group and not just at a public hearing. So, you know, I think I've indicated in the past that we really like to encourage that on projects where we feel like there's going to be a lot of folks involved in the discussion.
Yeah, I'd have to say the developer certainly has listened to not only the local neighborhood, but also the feedback from P&Z and City Council, and tried to take care of those as best they could. Any more questions or comments before we move on? Grant?
Yeah, Tom, in our packet, there is a exhibit provided by Hall and Hall, future land use map amendment. And this, I've got a point of inquiry here about what's shown on that. It, for the property or for the site where this development would go in, going to the, where I guess it would be west of Albernet Road, this particular exhibit indicates that existing land use would be single family detached. And so is that changing then to be the duplexes? I guess I'm just looking at it and just wondering if this exhibit in our packet actually is a revision behind.
Yeah, let me make sure that that's correct. I'll verify that before Thursday. Thank you for pointing that out. I just want to, I think yeah. Let me take a peek at that.
I didn't expect to be thanked for pointing that thing out.
Yeah, it looked like a first request, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what may have happened, and this was probably pulled from a larger map, and I'm wondering if the definitions were maybe not quite translated perfectly, but let me check into that.
Thank you. And I think there's been a responsiveness here to what I recall being the concerns of the area or the residents in that area. So I really think this looks like it's an improved project.
Any other comments or questions? We'll have another opportunity with the public hearing on Thursday. If not, we'll move on and move over to F5.
Unless there was question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I was just going to say, unless there were questions on F5 and 6, I wasn't planning to present anything on those.
Okay. Any questions for Tom on F5 and 6? F7 you already took care of earlier, correctly? Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then
absolutely, yeah.
On to F8.
Yes, and F8. I just wanted to highlight. You know, we had the conversation about the footing plans, footings being provided prior to complete review of the final site development plan. And I think in the packet you're seeing kind of you see this final site development plan that was proposed. You know, that's been reviewed by appropriate parties in the group and is being recommended for approval. You know, and then there's some illustrations in the packet that identify what the exterior of the building looks like. And those were also recommended for approval. And so I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is just following up to that formal process to get the final site development plan approved and allow the full building plan to be authorized for construction. So.
Okay. Questions? Okay, thank you, Tom. Next item is a discussion regarding the compensation study.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I'll go ahead and introduce this and then turn it over to Kirsten. So as the council will remember, the city entered into a contract with PayPoint HR to do a compensation study for the city of Marion. And just to give you some history and context on it, the city's current system for evaluating employee salaries really dates back into about 1994. And one of the challenges that we've had with looking at positions has been, as Marion has gotten larger, we've really left a lot of what would have been our peer communities behind when it comes to population. So we kept moving up the list. I think we're the 14th largest city in the state now. And so the comparators that you have out there, if you're just going directly city to city, have gotten fewer in number. Additionally, we had only ever really surveyed data related to non-bargaining positions and had never gone out outside of the scope of collective bargaining to look at where we were with the bargaining positions across the community as well. And so we contracted with PayPoint to do a much broader analysis and take a look at our local government peers outside of just the realm of cities. So they included counties. They did cast a much broader net for numbers of cities. And they also then specifically focused in on some positions that we knew that we just had trouble with. I'll pick one out just to give you an example. Marion has two positions on the books, one city engineer and one public services director. But if you look at some communities, that might be considered a public works director where it's one position. And so comparing apples to apples for actual job duties was challenging for some of the positions that we had. So we also asked them to focus in on some of those positions and look at what people were actually doing to make sure we were getting better comparables. So the results was presented to us in the compensation study that the city council's now had a chance to take some look at. And we'll have Kirsten walk through some of the highlights related to it. I would say that from our perspective, this is a good data point for us as we look at what we need to do to then start to update and develop a credible compensation system for the city of Marion.
Okay, I will take it over. So just to level set kind of parameters on the survey, PayPoint had sent out 73 market surveys that was restricted to a 130-mile radius to valid comparator organizations. And I'll talk about that in a second. They did receive 33 responses, which was a 45% response rate. You may find other compensation studies suggest that upwards of 20% is more typical of a response rate, but nonetheless, we did get a 45% response rate. So that turned out to be a nice sample for us. But the purpose of this study was to take a look at market data and analysis on benefits and compensation. And they also held employee focus group feedbacks to get feedback sessions to get kind of a state of the state. I guess our slides are going a little bit weird there, sorry. Can you go back to the last one for me, Terrell? Thank you. So again, they studied market data on comp benefits as well as employee focus group feedback. I'll go ahead and advance that slide. So the study wanted to take a look at our pay versus organizations that were similarly situated. So in order to determine whether or not they were similarly situated, they took a look at things like population, unemployment rate, median household income, things along those lines to make sure that it was a valid comparator. They determined that any organization that had a standard deviation of greater than 3 was determined not to be valid. So we wanted to really make sure that we were taking a look at organizations that were similar to Marion. You can go ahead and go to the next slide there. So the study itself consisted of 2 parts. One was the classification phase, and the other one was the compensation phase. The classification involved identifying jobs, reviewing and analyzing true job descriptions so that they were making sure that what an equipment operator was doing at Marion looked like what an equipment operator was doing at all of the comparators. And then the second portion of the study was the compensation phase, where they really began to take a look at the local labor pay and to compare what we were paying versus what they were paying. All in all, we took a look at, or they took a look at 280 employees in 100 distinct positions. And as we go through the information, just want to remind everybody that this study was done back in July of 2018. So we have some positions that aren't in existence anymore. And so this information is a snapshot in time back then. So Terrell, if you could take an slide. Thank you. And just to note, you've got these in your packets, the complete study in your packets. As they presented the data in the study, they talked about employee benefits and then focus group feedback and then compensation. In this study, we're going to take a look at compensation first, then employee benefits, and then the focus group feedback. So going into the recommendations, out of the gate, they are recommending that we raise the salary of 40 positions that they identified as below grade minimums at an approximate cost of $86,000 and changed. On your study, you can see the breakout by position, but for purposes of this presentation, we just wanted to keep it high level. But I'll give you guys a minute to take a look at those positions. Now, keep in mind the rate increases range anywhere from literally 1 penny more per hour to upwards of $10 and $15 an hour. So again, you can take a look at that by position rate increase in your packets. Next slide, please, Terrell. They're also recommending that we raise the hourly rate of 17 positions that are considered to be substantially below market. You guys can take a look at those. We're pretty good on fire and police and AFSCME, but non-marketing, we've got some opportunity there at an approximate cost of $120,000 and change. Next slide. They're also recommending we raise the salary of 6 positions that are below market. You guys can, we're just highlighting these here. And again, at an approximate cost of $30,000. And next slide. Now the next several slides are going to be these positions, but they're also recommending that we raise the salary of 169 positions that are below the recommended next step within the pay grades. And that would be an approximate cost of $132,000. Next slide. You guys will have the detail in your packets. It's the continuation of the 169 positions. Next slide, please, Terrell. You can go to the next one. So the net of the compensation recommendations, they're obviously recommending that we adjust the salary of positions that are near market with a normal base adjustment relative to experience and tenure. Obviously, they're going to recommend discontinuing rate increases for anyone that's above market or substantially above market. I want to point out here, though, I was a little bit confused about the data when I was reading. If you look at page 81 through 83 of your packets, it talks about positions being, they highlight 4 positions that are substantially below market, 3 that are below market, 24 are near market, 43 positions are above market, and 26 are substantially above market. As I'm looking at these recommendations, I think it was 87% of positions they recommended rate increases for. So I just wanted to call out that seemed to be a little bit conflicting to me. But my takeaway, and Lon, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we decided is that those were pay ranges and not pay. So it's a little bit confusing. So I just wanted to call that out. I had to read it a couple of times, but they are pay ranges that are for each position that are highlighted there. They're also suggesting that we adopt proposed internal equity recommendation so that certain positions that are similar in scope and responsibility are paid equitably across the city. They are also suggesting that we reclassify and do title changes for upwards of 30 positions. They are also recommending that we adopt adjusted salary grades and ranges for us to take a look at. And ultimately, as I just outlined, they are recommending that we implement pay rate changes, pay increases for 232 of the 280 employees that we took a look at. Next slide. So I'm moving quickly so we can have some time at the end, but relative to employee benefits, I'm not going to read all of the words on this page, but the net of this is that Marion is competitive in the public sector market relative to medical and dental benefits. They did find that we offer slightly less towards employee and family level premium contributions than our competitors. It's really important, I think, to notice that only public sector were surveyed in this. When we're comparing ourselves to the, even Rockwell Collins of the world or the GoDaddies of the world that are right here in our backyard, our medical and dental benefits are incredibly rich, and that needs to be taken into consideration. So next slide, Terrell, if you would please. Relative to holidays, you can see that we offer 13 paid holidays relative to our comparators. Again, these comparators are the public sector that we surveyed. They offer 10, so a little bit of a richer benefit there. Relative to sick leave, the typical accrual ranges between 9 and 18. We are offering up to 18, so again, very competitive in that arena. And then 81% of our comparators are offering a car allowance to some degree, whether it's a monthly stipend or a vehicle to use. So again, we're very competitive in that area. You want to go to the next slide, please? Relative to the feedback, the employee feedback, this was a voluntary exercise. All employees were asked to participate. Ultimately, 124 employees opted to participate in 7 on-site groups. Some key highlights, key wins for the city. The employees are ultimately proud of their city. They view it as a cultural hub. They definitely take pride in working for the city. They view our culture as positive. They are enjoying the relationships that they have here at work. They definitely want to know what is going on, feeling like that creates a environment of honesty and transparency. And ultimately, they expressed appreciation for the community and the community support of the city employees. Next slide. In terms of areas of opportunity and challenges facing us, workload was high on the list. There seems to be a lack of clarity on how work ties directly to the goal of the city, meaning, what's my individual contribution? How does that impact the goals of the city? Communication has been on every single employee survey of every industry, small or large, that I've ever worked in. And it's just an opportunity that we just want to keep our eye on that ball, but it will be an ongoing initiative, I'm sure. Staffing levels are not commensurate with growth. We are hearing training opportunities is another area of challenge for us. Cedar Rapids and other organizations were thought to have better pay scales, and they felt that there was a disconnect between pay for performance. There's a lot of feedback in the packet, but I took out some that I think that we should take a look at. Next slide. So some of the feedback and suggestions that they had, they would definitely like to see increased staffing levels. Employees would like to understand why, how, and what decisions were being made at the top is the terminology they used. Employees would like to see more positive interactions with department and city hall. Even since I've been here, there seems to be a little bit of a divide between external, or not city hall, it's an us versus them, city hall versus, other areas within the city. And then employees would like to know how positions are created and ultimately understand what their advancement opportunities are and earning potential is. So some more suggestions for us to consider. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps goes, I think that we need to take a look at what our compensation philosophy is, whether we want to lead, lag, or be at market, or a combination of both. Sometimes we don't need to be the market leader for a certain position, but other time we'll want to be leading that market. So determine what our compensation philosophy is. I would recommend drafting a compensation philosophy statement, and then ultimately we need to evaluate and assess the recommendations made by PayPoint HR. Down the road, we need to take a look at our compensation framework in totality, and then ultimately create a performance review process. Compensation and the performance review hold hands, I feel like, in terms of employee engagement. And so that's really needs to be a cornerstone of our talent plan going forward. So I know I went fast, but does anybody have any questions? Or Lon, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think in looking at some of the conclusions that are in the study, there are a couple of things that I would really want to call out for the City Council. And one is that if you look at the timing of when the study was done, the data was gathered in July of 2019. Because when I saw a lot of the data come in, I just kind of wondered, well, how come so many positions are being recommended for adjustments on steps? And come to realize that because of the timing, Marion is a little bit unique in that, especially for a lot of our bargaining positions, we have done a lot of wage splits where there's one wage increase on July 1 and then a second one on April 1. And so if you look into the report and start to look at some of the actual dollar amounts that they were recommending, you can see that there'd be a period of time there after July 1 where we might have lagged some of those competitors. But then when the April 1 increases were applied, we were right back to being commensurate with market. The other thing that I think we need to do, as Kirsten alluded to, is that since the study was conducted, there have been people that have left to go to other organizations. There have been promotions. The library in particular really has taken a close look at their job titles and job duties to realign everything, to adjust their pay models and duties to prep for the opening of the new facility. So we need to true up the data in the report with the real world picture on the ground in the city right now. But the biggest question I think that we have, that we need some guidance from you on the City Council, is that compensation philosophy. Really just where do you want or expect us to be? The other thing that I think that this study shows is just the difficulty in trying to establish a one size fits all system that covers the breadth and variety of positions that the city has. I mean, literally we have everybody from mechanics to civil engineers, police officers and equipment operators. We have people in IT, and some of those have private sector markets that we're competing with, and some of them don't. If I use myself as an example, in the Cedar Rapids metro area, there's only a couple of other city manager positions. And so, it's not as though I'm going to jump over to the private sector. But when it comes to things like IT or engineers, there's intense competition with the private sector. So trying to design a system where the same philosophy is applied to every grade and every position may not be reflective of the local markets. So I know when we look at for example, their recommendation to establish steps and grades for positions, that can be really challenging for some of those where you might see a significant increase due to talent demand year over year. So we view this really as one data point, but I know just in conversations with Kirsten, with her breadth of experience in HR, she's got other data points that she has used successfully with past employers that would become part of the puzzle for us as well as we look to draft that new strategy.
Any comments, observations, questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Kirsten, this is Steve. One of the big questions I have, so I made it through the first 47 pages of this document one time. I've not looked at all the information and data in the back. But when they recommend that basically 70% of our workforce needs a raise, I didn't see anything in the first 47 pages that told me what they're basing that on. Are they basing that on the average wage of all these other comparators, or a certain percentage of a wage range? I mean, that's a very, very large number for them to come to that conclusion. So can you kind of tell us how they came to that conclusion on all of these people should have these specific dollar amounts of raises? Because I could not discern that at all from the first 45 pages of the report.
Sure. And as Lon said earlier, this is one set of data, and it's only one. There is some good information in this, but I would say that it's incomplete in a number of ways, and we can talk about that another time if when time allows. But the bottom line is they had 33 respondents that were considered to be similar to the city of Marion. They went through what's called like a job leveling exercise, again, where they make sure that an administrative assistant in the city of Marion is doing the exact same scope and responsibility in terms of work at all these other public sector organizations. And then they averaged out the salaries and they compared how we're paying versus what those salaries are in totality. And that's how they are they're saying, based on these 33 organizations that we surveyed, you are below market and therefore or below what they're paying. And that's the adjustment.
So they did it based on the average of all of those other cities.
Correct. And just to be clear, and for council and for mayor, I'm not even necessarily suggesting that we respond in totality to this. It's a set of data for us to consider, but there's a lot of moving parts to it. It is simply 33 public sector organizations that are in our 135 mile an hour radius. So I think that we can consider it, but I don't necessarily think that we should pull any levers right now. So, but
well, we're in a position, I agree that we need a compensation philosophy. I'm not sure what all is involved in that, but I've done that at a private setting before, not necessarily a public. But in this particular situation now, all of a sudden you have 230 people looking at this report and saying, hey, I'm ready, I'm due for a raise. And I kind of have a little bit of concern about now what the expectations are for the workforce for the city of Marion.
Yeah, and I think that's valid. I think it's about level setting that this is one study that was done. Even if it was determined that, these raises should change, it would never be something that we would flip a switch and it would happen overnight. It would have to happen over a period of time. But our compensation requires a much deeper dive and a much more holistic and comprehensive view than just this, in my opinion.
And I would say, Steve, that I think that's where we need to true it up with the data on the ground now, because there have been, like in the case of the bargaining units, there was the April 20 raise cycle and the July 1 20 raise cycle now that we've already been through. The pay for performance positions have been through a round of pay for performance. And as I said, we've had people shift jobs and move jobs and have had some departments do a pretty detailed analysis of their workforce and change classifications and change positions. So we need to take the data that they presented us and then true it up with what it looks like on the ground right now and see if and how many of the identified gaps would still be out there.
And I think we need to ask ourselves exactly how we want to use this data. I mean, this doesn't necessarily need to be our marching orders. It's a segment of the workforce, but it's, I think we need to ask ourselves what we want to do with the information.
Okay, Colette, go ahead.
So just another follow-up question. The study at the position level was based purely on salaries and not salaries and benefits. Is that accurate? You showed that we might be comparable or above based on some of our benefits, but that wasn't considered at the position level. Is that accurate?
Well, they chunked it out. They looked at salary and then they looked at benefits in totality and then the feedback. So it wasn't like they did total compensation statements for each of these, meaning they took in position by position, went in with compensation and benefits in. I'm not making a lot of sense. it was simply chunked out. They took a look at salary to salary and then benefits to benefits, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. That's what I was assuming. And I just thought, I mean, I think that's important to recognize too, right? That when
Yes.
you have a position, it's not just the salary, it's the salary and benefits. And sometimes benefits can compensate for the salary or vice versa. I'm not suggesting that is the case, but I wanted to make sure that I understood.
Without question. And that's why, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's it.
And that's why I think it's really important to recognize that this was strictly public sector, because when it comes to other comp, I mean, if we were to take an IT person from someone in the private sector, their benefits may not come, they may pale in comparison to what we offer here. So it is that total compensation that we want the latitude to look at every time we go to recruit and retain.
And I would say that that is one of the benefits of them having compared to public sector employers, because public sector employers in Iowa are all going to be in IPERS for your non-public safety positions. Marion is one of the 47 cities and counties that's in municipal police and fire. So we have to be a little bit more careful when we look at that side of the equation. But that was one of the reasons we asked them to focus in a little bit more specifically on the medical benefit side, because retirement contributions, FICA, IPERS contributions, those were going to be common across other public sectors employers. But obviously, as you get into private sector employers, you're getting into different types of retirement systems and different retirement vehicles. So I think that's why they didn't specifically call that out in this report.
Renee, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple things. I agree with what Steve said. This is kind of like out of the bag, and there might be an expectation when I think everyone in the room who's part of this discussion can clearly understand this is one piece of a larger puzzle that we need more information. I was hoping to have this information before our budget meetings, because this might help inform some of that. So I don't know where that leaves us. And I do welcome a conversation on our philosophy, because, and I don't know when that is. I mean, I jotted down some things that I would say toward that, but I think my overall question is, do we ever have a problem hiring? Do people leave because the benefits and money aren't good? Because I think that's a really important question. I think people are generally happy here, and there's a very good relationship. And I think that counts for something. It's not always just about numbers. And so I'd be curious, when we advertise for positions, do we have a lot of respondents? I feel like we do. Do people leave if we're doing exit interviews because the pay is better somewhere else? I'd be curious to know that. I think culture also is a big piece of why people go places. It's not always just about the money. And I think that the feedback on the culture here has always been good, at least from everything that I've heard. And I think that should also be a factor, because people spend a huge chunk of their lives in their jobs. And so you want to be happy where you work. So I welcome the discussion on what our philosophy is in terms of hiring and compensation. I would like to incentivize for efficiency and timeliness of projects, and on budget or under budget, and those types of things. 360-degree feedback from all the levels. And so I think this was a great conversation starter, but I think we still have a long way to go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Renee, I totally agree. To answer a couple of your questions, we have had, since I've been here, at least one person and maybe two leave for pay. As Nick Glue stated earlier, the unemployment rate is shrinking, which is great news. But that doesn't mean that the war on talent is alive and well. Employment is intensely personal. Not everybody is going to leave for money or come for money, for that matter. Some people want to work close to home. Some people want a casual work environment. Some people want to work in a flat organization. So it is intensely personal, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done, to your point. We don't have the candidate pipeline that I would like to see. So I'm feverishly working on creating an intense talent plan and a recruitment process and a recruitment strategy to increase that pipeline. So there's a lot of moving parts for sure, but you're exactly right. I agree with you.
And I'd say, to just add a little clarification on that, to Renee's point about turnover, that's where it's really unevenly distributed across the organization. We can see intense competition for talent in some disciplines, but as I said, not necessarily in other ones. And that's where the challenge for us is having an equitable system that still allows us to be competitive in some of those arenas where you may see cost escalation for particular skill sets that goes up a lot more than the rest of the market. That's why, as we start putting something like this together, I really hope to be able to draw on council's collective experience, because I know several of you have worked or continue to work in industries where competition for talent is fierce, and learning what you've been able to do to not only attract and retain people will help us to inform us creating a compensation framework that can keep us competitive in not just the real straightforward like civil service type positions where the process is prescribed by code, but in those other ones where we are losing people.
Lastly, I would just offer that compensation is something that needs to be revisited often. It's not like we will create this framework or this infrastructure and then it's done. It tends to be a living, breathing thing, and it will allow us to be nimble and respond to market quickly.
Anyone have any comments before we go back to Steve? Anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? Randy, you have anything?
No, I do not, Mayor. Thank you for asking though.
Okay, back to Steve.
Just a couple of comments, one follow-up. First of all, I do like the idea with as many positions as we have in the city is looking at internal equity, because there's certainly, I think, a number of positions that probably have similar skill sets and probably should have similar compensation. But the one question I have, Kirsten, is there's 25 pages of comments from the meetings that went on. I think in here it's called the focus groups.
Yep.
25 pages of comments. My question is, in order for this consulting group to put a comment in there, how many people needed to make that comment? So does a comment represent a multiple number of people? Or if a person made a comment, did that comment get put in there?
That is a great question that I will probably have to defer to Lon if he knows, because I wasn't here. This predates me. So I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for you on that question.
Unfortunately,
report on trends. Sorry, Lon.
I do not have an answer for that one either. We will have to check with the study firm.
I can answer that, Lon. I think they only wanted to highlight if the comment was significant enough, if it showed up in multiple responses.
Typically, studies report. Oh, I'm sorry, Mom.
So a significance as a percentage of the overall responses. So
well, I think it has an impact on how we look at those 25 pages. Because I read through all of those, and there is a lot of comments, suggestions, some that ought to be looked at and considered further. But if only one person made a comment, I'd look at that differently compared to if 5 or 7 people made that comment. So that's all.
Yep. So they said they made sure that it's significant enough. That means more than 5% at least. So unless they felt like it's a common theme in the responses, they would not highlight it.
That's what I've seen in the past, Amal, too, that they report out on trends and common themes within the feedback.
Yep.
Okay, anything else on that item? Thank you to everyone. Good discussion. You have a closed session this evening. Randy, are you willing to make the motion?
Yes, Your Honor. I will move to go to closed session.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to move to adjourn to closed session regarding confidential records pursuant to section 22.750 as permitted under section 21.51K of the Code of Iowa. Do we have the attorney's statement, please?
Yes, Your Honor. I have reviewed the subject matter of the proposed closed session. It is appropriate to review pursuant to Iowa Code Section 21.5, subparagraph 1, subparagraph K of the Iowa Code, specifically as it relates to confidential records under Iowa Code Section 22.7, subparagraph 50. Recommend that council adjourn to closed session accordingly.
Okay, maybe we have any discussion before we vote? Maybe we have the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins, Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mayor Abu Osley,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Gedalia,
Yes.
Mr. Sterned.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We're adjourned to closed session.